Let me introduce you to a couple of our guests, because I think we have some interesting times ahead, and I have a feeling the audience is waiting to pounce. Edward Griffin is the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, and Mike Calabria is the director of financial regulation at the Cato Institute. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you, Glenn.
Did I get it right as far as you're concerned?
Mark, but...
oh, did I say? What did I say?
I think you said Michael. But
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
My brother will be talking.
Okay, good. So, Mark, did I get it right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Let me go to... Now, I want to make sure I get G. G, do I call you G or do I call you Edward? Or G-Ed?
Edward will work just fine.
Okay. How about G-Money? Edward, did I get the story right, and what did I miss?
You got the story very, very right. A lot of very interesting details. Of course, we don't have time for it in a program like this, but the essence of it, you got exactly right.
Okay. What did I miss that is important? In fact, let me go here. Let me go here. I'm going to show you this timeline, and this timeline shows all of the crashes, not the panics, but the crashes in the United States. A crash in '35, one in 1880. Then it kind of picks up. 1880, 1896, 1900, 1903, 1907, then nothing till 1929, then 37, 38, 46, 62, 87. There seems to be this clump of crashes here. Is there anything nefarious about those crashes, or is this just bad policy and everything else?
Well, there are two things. First of all, you asked if there was anything that was left out. As I said, the important items were there, but there's one thing you might want to explain to the audience, and the reason for the secrecy that you mentioned. Why were they concealing their identities? Why did they deny that they went to this meeting? And the answer is because if the American people had known that this bill, which was supposed to protect the American people from the big bad bankers, was actually written by those same bankers, well, then the scam would have been out in the open. And that's why they had to keep the whole thing secret until many years after the meeting took place.
Hey, okay, so Edward, hang on just a second. We just did a story this week where the unions and all of these people are saying the big bag banks are getting all of our money. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, the unions are the ones that racked up all this debt. Then the government takes the money from the taxpayers and then has given it to the banks. The banks are the ones that are, through the central banks, causing all this problem. Mark, can you help me on this? I mean, it's...
well, very much so. I mean, what we've seen is the central bank pushing all this money into the system. The Federal Reserve very much played a key role in creating the housing bubble to begin with. I mean, you might remember after the dot-com bubble burst,
right,
after 9/11, we cut rates, the Fed cut rates, Greenspan took them to historic lows, the mortgage market, the housing market took off, and eventually that bubble was going to burst, and it burst in 2006 when the Fed started raising rates. So they played a very big role in this, and they're trying to create bubbles today. If you look at what the quantitative easing is doing, you look at the interest rates we're seeing now.
Would you agree with me? It's the last one. It's the last bubble. I think I dubbed this maybe in 2005. I think I said housing bubble, and then we're going to have the last one, the money bubble.
Yes.
It is the last one, too.
Well, let's hope it's the last one. I suspect that after this bubble burst, the Fed's going to look for a way to try to create another bubble to try to make us forget about the last bubble. And that's really the way they were doing it. There's a very conscious attitude in 2003, 2004 to say, okay, we're coming off this recession across with the dot-com bubble. What do we do to make people feel wealthier? What do we do to get people to go out and spend? And what they decided to do was, let's gin up the housing market. Everybody will feel like they have a lot of money.
Right.
It'll a lot of people to work. And so what are they trying to do now? Let's gin up the stock market. So it really is creating one bubble to try to offset the effect of the last bubble.
So, Edward, let me go back to you. We see the way they're working the bubbles now, but let me go back into the past. We see this clump of crashes here. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's like a panic in the 1890s, either 1892 or 1896, where I believe it was J.P. Morgan that loaned money to the United States. He came in and personally bailed out and said, I'll lend you money. Then another one happened in like '03, and he said, you know, I can't do this anymore. You guys are on your own, but I'll get my friends together and bail you guys out one more time, and they did. And that's what kind of led to this, correct?
Well, that's exactly the historic origin of it. But I think underlying this, we have to recognize the principle of the Ponzi scheme. The system really is a Ponzi scheme as we're living through it right now. It works as long as the money supply continues to expand and expand and expand, like any Ponzi scheme. You pay off the first investors so that they're very happy. They bring in the new investors. As long as it expands, it works. But when it finally stops, the whole thing comes to an end. That's why they have to keep expanding the money supply. Well, when you create money out of nothing, you also face the fact that money goes back into nothing. So this kind of a system makes the expansion and contraction inevitable. The booms and the busts are inevitable. If the money were backed by something solid, like gold or silver, that you just couldn't create out of thin air, well, then there wouldn't be these contractions or expansions. It would be a nice, even playing field.
Most people think that our money is kind of backed by something in Fort Knox. And I have talked to several congressmen who have asked to go see the gold in Fort Knox, and they can't go see the gold in Fort Knox. It is, I mean...
That's, you know, sort of surprising, because one would think that congressmen and I can understand why they might not let me see it. I might want to take some of it out with me.
Well, the largest collection of gold is here at the Federal Reserve, right?
Exactly.
And that's not American money, that's the Fed's.
That's the Fed's, and a lot of what the Fed, for the New York Federal Reserve, keeps is gold for other people.
Right.
Like there might be gold for the Bank of England here in New York that they're keeping, and they quite often will just put it on a cart and move it from one person's account to another.
Edward, do you believe we have gold in Fort Knox? I mean, a lot of gold in Fort Knox? Is it still there?
I think it's very naive to think that we have any gold there for the reason you said. If they had it, they would show it. It's as simple as that.
Okay, back in...
They don't have any gold there.
Back in just a second.